Grain-free, raw diet, vegetarian. With so many options, it's hard to know how to feed our pups. So what's the deal with these trendy dog diets? Let's bark about it. Welcome back to Alpha Pop, your destination for everything dog. I'm Bernie Zilio, and I'm on a mission to answer every doggone question you have ever had about your fur babies. And today, we're going to be debunking some dog fad diets. And fortunately, we have an expert vet, Dr. Ross Bernstein, with us today. Dr. Ross is a seasoned veterinary professional and pet care expert. He earned his doctorate degree in veterinary medicine at UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, and his work has been featured in several industry-leading publications, including the Journal of Veterinary Surgery. He is our go-to vet for everything we want and need to know about our fur babies. So welcome back to AlphaPod, Dr. Ross.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Okay, so today, Dr. Ross, we are going to be talking about 3 dog diets in particular: the grain-free diet, the raw diet, and the vegetarian diet. But before we get into all that, can you just tell us why nutrition is so important for our pups?
Nutrition is really important for our pups, just like it is for you or me. It can affect everything they do. It affects every organ. It affects their energy level. It can pretty much have an impact on everything. So nutrition is vitally important to their health.
Okay, so is there a way for us as pet parents to know that our dogs are getting the proper nutrition?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. First, I would say the most important thing is to check for the food label. When you're in the store, it can be kind of sometimes overwhelming with all the different food options that are available in the stores. Something to help you narrow it down is when you find the food that you want, you can check for something called an AFCO statement. That AFCO statement will let you know that that food has gone through what are called feeding trials. And that lets you know that the food in that bag meets the nutritional needs of dogs. That AFCO statement can also take it one step further and let you know that that food is for certain life stages, such as puppies and development or adult maintenance diets. So that's important too, that you're not feeding an adult dog a puppy food, because that could have way too many calories.
Okay, so would you say that the AFCO for dogs would kind of be like the FDA for humans in a way?
Yeah, definitely. It's very similar. It's a governing body that lets you know the nutritional adequacy of the diet. And there's very few regulations that exist on dog food. And there's a lot of marketing and buzzwords that can become fad diets. And so the AFCO statement is a good way for pet owners to know that the diet that they're feeding to their pets is one that is well balanced and meets their nutritional needs.
So based on all of that, I have a feeling that some of these trend diets don't necessarily meet AFCO, I guess, criteria. So let's start with the first one. The most popular fad diet is actually the grain-free diet. Now, is that even healthy for dogs?
It's definitely one that is a fad diet where the percentage of dogs that have a grain allergy or grain intolerance is very, very low, whereas the amount of dogs fed a grain-free diet is way larger than that. So dogs actually do need grains. They are not like wolves. A lot of people think that because dogs descended from wolves, that they are wolves, but that's kind of skipping a huge gap in their evolution where they can digest grains. And so there should be grains in their food. But taking that one step further, there were several dogs that were diagnosed by veterinary cardiologists to have dilated cardiomyopathy, or DCM. And these dogs were not the typical dogs that were getting DCM, and they traced it back to a common link of them being fed these grain-free diets. Now, the actual causative factor is still unknown, but a lot of these diets either came from boutique pet food manufacturers and sometimes had exotic proteins like crocodile, ostrich, or kangaroo. And sometimes even the first few ingredients in the food were sweet peas, lentils, sweet potatoes, and foods like that. And those foods, a lot of the time, or a lot of these dogs that were found to have dilated cardiomyopathy were fed grain-free diets. And those were some of the, if you compared an AFCO approved diet with these diets that were, or with the dogs that were diagnosed with DCM, their diets had those ingredients. The FDA actually came out with a warning statement that there is a potential link between grain-free diets and dilated cardiomyopathy. And dilated cardiomyopathy is a potentially deadly heart disease where the heart muscle actually weakens, and your dog can, if it progresses into heart failure, your dog can have sudden death. So this is a very serious warning that was put out, and they had several food brands that were being investigated further. And I think pet owners should definitely be aware of this potential correlation between grain-free diets and this potentially deadly heart disease.
Wow, that's really scary. I know you mentioned sweet potato and peas and things of that nature. Are those proper substitutes for grains, or do dogs need certain types of grains in their diet?
So if you're looking at the diet ingredients, the first main ingredient should be a protein source, such as chicken or beef, fish. It shouldn't be a substitute like a lentils or sweet pea. It should still be, the main ingredient should still be a protein source. And then also with the carbohydrate, the next most common one should be like a rice or potato. Those other ingredients may be okay. It's just that the nutritional adequacy hasn't been investigated and gone through as much research or time trials to know that those ingredients are actually a well-balanced diet for your dog. They might be okay, but there's just very limited data out there that exists.
So based on what you're saying, I assume that a raw diet is also not good for our dogs.
Those are also another fad diet that are out there, and they're also definitely not recommended.
Okay. And that's because they pretty much lack all types of grains and carbohydrates, right?
That is a big part of it, that if you are going to be feeding a raw diet, you don't know that diet is actually well balanced. And so dogs do need their protein, they need their carbohydrates, and they need their fats. And they also need vitamins and minerals to make sure that they're getting all the nutrients that they need. And so feeding a raw diet, such as if you go to the store and make something yourself, you don't know that you're putting together the ingredients in a fashion that meets your dog's needs. Another huge issue and potential risk with feeding raw food diets is that for us, or you or I went to the store, if we buy raw chicken, we kind of know that there is a kill step to kill any bacteria such as Salmonella, Campylobacter, Listeria, E. coli. We know that if we buy raw chicken at the store, we come home and we cook it. We don't just eat it raw like that. So there's a huge contamination risk factor associated with feeding raw food diets, where your dogs might not always get sick, but if they come in contact with a young child or someone that's immunocompromised, that poses a very serious risk to that person, who can then become infected with Salmonella, or sometimes your dog can also get sick too. And if they become infected with Salmonella, they could have diarrhea and vomiting and other potential adverse effects. There were some studies that showed that even if you if your dog is being fed a raw food diet and you wash that food bowl, there are still contaminants left there up to 2 weeks later, even after being washed. There were dogs that were being fed a raw chicken diet, and they developed a condition called polyradiculoneuritis, which in people is similar to a Guillain-Barré syndrome. And there are so many risks associated with feeding a raw food diet, versus there's not one potential benefit that has ever been demonstrated.
So why are people feeding their dogs raw food? I don't understand.
A lot of people think that their dogs are wolves, and that wolves are wild, and that your dog should be fed a raw diet because they're wolves. But no, that skips a whole period of evolution where dogs were evolved to have different enzymes that digest food, and they should be eating cooked food some people think that feeding a raw food diet fixes or can help their coat, can help their poops. But really that can be traced back to the omega-3 fatty acids or fat content in the food that can help the coat, the amount of fiber in the diet that can help their pooping. Or sometimes dogs have a food allergy, and if you started feeding them a raw food diet, you might just be switching the protein source in their food, or feeding them what's called a limited ingredient diet. If they were getting their kibble had a blend of beef, chicken, and pork, for example, and then you all of a sudden just started feeding them chicken, then maybe you've eliminated that food allergy, which is to one of those previous proteins. And so there's not one single benefit that they can get from the raw food diet that you can't get from cooking that food.
Copy. Stay away from raw food for both humans and animals, at least for dogs. So let's switch gears a little bit. I know in LA, everybody is all about putting their dogs on vegan or vegetarian diets. And based on what you said about the importance of protein, I assume those diets aren't great either?
So yes, I would say it's best to stay away from a vegetarian or vegan diet, unless you are getting your diet formulated by a veterinary nutritionist, because theoretically it is possible to give them a vegetarian or vegan diet. And there are some prescription diets that are out there that are vegetarian or vegan. In some disease states, if a dog has liver disease, for example, or if they have a really, really severe food allergy, they can be put on a vegan diet with a hydrolyzed protein that has no animal source of protein in that diet whatsoever. But really, if you're not going through a veterinary nutritionist or a website called balanceit.com that actually lets you know which vitamins and minerals are deficient in that home prepared diet, then it's really risky that you're feeding them a diet that is not balanced.
Okay, well, thank you. So now we know what not to feed our dogs. So I do want to ask you, what ingredients should we be looking for in our dog's food?
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to is looking for an AAFCO statement. That AAFCO statement lets you know that it's balanced. That statement will also let you know what life stage that food is intended for. Then another thing you can look for is that it's not grain-free, so that it has grains. And then a diet that is not raw. Those are probably the three biggest things I'd recommend to look for in a dog food. And so brands like Hills, Purina, and Royal Canin, those are three brands that have all gone through extensive feeding trials that show that their diets meet the nutritional needs of dogs. And no, veterinarians are not paid by these companies to say that. We are just reporting what the data and the research has shown. And I mean, some veterinarians, those companies do hire nutritionists to make sure that their diets are adequate. And that lets veterinarians know that we can recommend those for pets. Like, I am not paid, and most veterinarians are not paid by them at all to recommend that. It's just those diets we know meet their needs.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have heard that rumor before as well, that veterinarians are sort of encouraged to push certain food brands. But what you're saying is you just report on the statistics and the facts. And obviously, if all of you have the same information, it's going to be the same food brands.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ross. This was incredibly helpful. I know food is one of the biggest topics of concern for a lot of pet parents. So you have really shed some light today. And hopefully now we can all give our dogs the nutrition that they deserve.
If you guys have any other questions or concerns, drop a comment below and we'll feature you in a future video.
Thanks so much for watching. Again, I'm Bernie Zilio, and this is Alpha Paw. Be sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single doggone episode. See you next time.